Today on my show, Your Story with Melinda, I have an incredible sojourner, wanderer, and traveler with me in the studio. Nate Petersen is actually hitchhiking across Canada to tell wanderers like himself about community, spirituality, otherness, and travel. He shares today on the show about what it means to be a millennial, about the wonder and the goodness of uncertainty, and he talks about what he's learned hitchhiking across Canada and down the west coast of the USA. He shares about his encounters with people who have loved him even in their differences. Nate Petersen, it is so great to have you on Your Story with Melinda. It is so wonderful that after all of your expeditions and adventures, you're actually here in a studio today. So welcome.
It's really good to be here. Thank you very much.
So in my intro, I talk about, hitchhiking. And for many people, there's stereotypes and there's also this like weird little fear in the bottom of our heart or wherever that is and going, oh my goodness, people still hitchhike? Is it safe? Why would you even do that? So I want to hear a little bit about how you got into it and a little bit about your travels and adventures too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the reasons that I love hitchhiking is because it does challenge people's perceptions of safety and of certainty. And I think that coming from a white privileged background, it's an opportunity to kind of digest all of that on the side of the road and kind of interact with strangers and remove myself from a comfortable circle.
Wow. So for someone like me who is about safety and security, that sounds terrifying about like being on the side of the road and you don't know when the next car or truck is going to pick you up. So, that's really uncertain. And why is that okay with you? Uncertainty.
I love the idea of challenging ourselves to step outside of comfort. And I think that there's a wonderful experience when I'm out there putting my thumb out, when I can kind of just bask in the inevitable uncertainty that we all face in our lives.
Ooh. So for some people it's like, but you're choosing to put yourself out there. Like life is uncertain, when you're kind of doing the day-to-day and you feel that you have some kind of control over the choices you make. Go to work 9 to 5, come home, make dinner, do the kids' homework, that kind of thing. And when uncertainty comes or things happen, you're like, whoa. But this is, I think, for a lot of us but you're actually, Nate, putting yourself in full uncertainty and really at the mercy of other people.
Yeah, and at the mercy of God.
Yes.
I think that's a big part of it as well. It's a chance to experience God in a new way outside of a structured religion, or it's the day-to-day experience of waking up in a tent and going out to the road that really helps me reflect on my own sense of security and where that's coming from.
So when you go hitchhiking, talk to me about all the places you've hitchhiked. Like what kind of areas, routes, where in the world?
So I started 4 years ago. So my very first hitchhiking experience came from, I was working up at a summer camp in Muskoka at Minneoe, and all summer long I had signed up too late for the bus, but to go into town for my day off. And so we go in, and every week they would say, oh, that's okay, you just take it. So my very first experience was at the very end of the summer thinking, I've taken advantage of this system for way too long, and I need to just do it on my own and face the fact that I haven't been playing by the rules.
Yeah.
And so I walked out, and I ended up finding this little toy car on the side of the road, and little did I know that little toy car was going to be a huge impact in my life, because it would sit on my shelf and I would think about that experience. And I thought about hitchhiking for a long time. So 4 years ago, I was watching a movie it was called Into the Wild, about this guy who travels across the country and has these great adventures with my friend, and he asked if I wanted to go hitchhiking across the country, and I thought, oh, what a wonderful idea. It turned out that he didn't want to actually do that, but the more I thought about it, I was like, I need to do it with a partner. And when I couldn't find a partner, it kind of turned into this, I can do it with God. And that turned into hitchhiking across Canada, coast to coast. And then when I finished that, and it was such a wonderful, invigorating and contemplative experience.
So across Canada, how long did it take you?
That one, it was just about getting there. And so it was 15 days.
So 15 days from, what was your starting place?
I started, it was a little bit broken up. I kind of started in St. Stephen.
St. Stephen?
New Brunswick.
And you went all the way across to?
Victoria.
Victoria in 15 days.
In 15 days, yeah.
Wow.
And then I wanted to continue, so 2 years later, I went from Victoria down to San Diego.
Victoria, BC to San Diego. How long did that take?
That one, I took 2 months to do that.
2 months.
Yeah.
And was that more because you wanted to kind of reflect or like really be present in those places, or was it because you couldn't really get the pickups or the people to pick you up to drive you to the next destination?
It's definitely all about just experiencing the road. And so when people say, oh, you can take ride shares, they have those now, or something like that, it's like, no, I actually want to step onto the road and just see what life what life has to offer.
Yeah. Nate, biggest things that you've learned on the road, people, what God has sort of like downloaded into you as you do this. I think, as I'm sort of projecting my own fears, like you're by yourself. So then that means that you're present with yourself and faced with yourself. And I've talked about this before. Sometimes that's like the worst person to be with yourself, alone and in the quietness. And then meeting people that you have no idea who they are and what they're about. So I would love to hear a bit of some of those learnings on the road, as you've gone.
Absolutely. So for me, it's testing both my extroverted self and my introverted self. Long waits on the side of the road or camping in the woods. They're both lots of self-reflection and being okay with silence and being okay with contemplation. And then these long extroverted times, maybe my longest drive was maybe 8 hours or so.
Wow.
And these long drives with strangers, you really learn a lot about how to interact with difference and with otherness. And so that long drive there was a man who he had just left his wife. He had driven 10 minutes, picked me up, and then we drove 8 hours together. And it was an incredible experience. I often say that a stranger is the best therapist because there's no preconceptions to jump off of.
That's amazing. And with God, is there something about uncertainty and God that go hand in hand?
Absolutely, yes. I think that a lot of our religious structures are trying to box God into our understanding of the world and how we interact with the rules and structures and the straight lines on the road. And what I'm doing is really enjoying the movement between the dotted lines and kind of I'm excited by the idea of Celtic Christianity is more about being in nature and noticing and observing God in the wind and in the movement of the circle of life.
Do you think like anybody can do this? I mean, do they have to go hitchhiking to do this, or do you think everybody should have experienced it at one point? Or when you're thinking through the masses and encouraging people, what would you say to them?
I mean, it's certainly not for everyone, but I think that the element of it that is for everyone that I would challenge everybody to open themselves up to is to experience otherness in new and creative ways. When you can never learn anything from sameness. Nobody's ever learned a single thing from sameness. You learn from difference. And so when you open yourself up to difference and otherness, it's an educational experience that really, really is transformative. And that's how we learn and we grow is through difference and otherness.
The thing I love about this, Nate, is that you're meeting new people and there's a dependence because you need them to get you where you need to go. But then you're placed in a situation where then you have to be open and conversational and open to them versus, you know, how I think in especially in Western society, like we choose and pick and choose the people that are like us.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, you know, I mean, as much as I'm about community and tribe, if I look at my people, we're pretty same.
Right. Which there is a wonderful.
And it's what it is.
Yeah.
It's good. But then if you're there too much, then there isn't the challenge on you know, seeing the world and people differently, or but yet we're all the same, or seeing how God sees other people. I think there's something in that, eh?
Yeah, there's a shared humanity that you can interact with, for sure. And for me, like I have a wonderful community back in New Brunswick that I love learning from and digesting these experiences with. But for me, stepping out of that is when I can create the experience to go back and contemplate with my friends and with my teachers and mentors.
So an experience like this isn't just isolated or sort of on its own, but you take this experience as something where you learn and then you can give back and share those with other people.
Yeah, you can certainly. The pendulum swings, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. You know, Nate, you're in millennial age group, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but where does this wanderlust and this understanding of others come from? I mean, let's go back a little bit from your own childhood. What would you say were some key things within your upbringing that's really helped you see the world that way? Because I think for, you know, viewers and listeners that are watching this and listening, especially for parents or young parents, how do they develop in their kids this kind of understanding of the world and desire to see the world this way?
I was born in, my parents were missionaries in Colombia. So I was born in Colombia, and so I think that I've had the travel bug ever since I stepped into this world. And my parents fostered that in me through various trips, especially trips overseas to the developing world. And I think that my love for humanity is born out of experiencing or witnessing life in the slums and noticing that these people are actually happy. They're like, not because they have all the comforts, but because they don't, and because they have a community and this safety net of relationship instead of an economic safety net. And it's in their struggle that they relate to one another and find purpose and joy. And I think that the travel experiences to South and Central America and then Southeast Asia as well, and Africa have all been very formative in really realizing that Western society, as wonderful as it is in some senses, is also quite broken in our understanding of what brings joy and happiness and a relationship with God.
Nate, how do we then in you know, North America, how do we kind of break away from that? Because it is hard. You know, you're here, you're working, you're trying to do your best, but I think you're right. I think we've gotten sort of lulled into this way, and we've kind of lost that connection with others, or lost true deep happiness in what we have and how we're living. What would be your advice to people or encouragement to them?
I think going back to the idea of otherness and difference being the seed of education from which knowledge grows, I think that when we can take our certainty and our pursuit of happiness and instead have a pursuit of unhappiness and kind of like challenge ourselves with the opposite of our comforts, I think that that's the gateway into really pursuing something that's meaningful and purposeful in life.
You know, what you talk about is, you know, choice, right? And I think that that's a big thing, because some people don't want to choose that, right? Like, we look at our life and we're like, we're okay, it's fine. But, you know, when I listen to you, Nate, it's like there's so much beauty and wonder that comes with, you know, changing that mindset and choosing to, you know, to be with people that are different, listen to their story, and choose to go into those kinds of places to really experience this. Do you think we're missing out?
I mean, I think that's a question you have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're lethargic, or you know you're looking at people who are traveling and dreaming of travel, and I think that what we're actually searching for is something unexpected and something that isn't planned. And so that's my that's why I'm doing this trip, is because studying in university for the past 4 years, there's certainly been a routine that develops with studies, and for me, this is just a chance to step away from that routine and digest the whole experience of university, because it was such a rich experience.
Yeah.
But then to step out of the routine and reflect back on it is just
Amazing.
something that I had to do.
As a millennial, and I know that a lot of millennials don't like having the label, but just like me as a Gen Xer, Nate, we were always like, we were sort of like this anti-establishment, angsty, Nirvana, Pearl Jam. Like we were like, that's sort of like our roots. And we were all like, had big dreams of what the church was to be and how the world was to be. And, as I look at millennials and that whole generation of what they're about, I mean, give me some insight, because I'm fascinated with this next generation sort of behind me.
Yeah.
I'm challenged, but I'm encouraged. But what would you say is the greatest, needs as far as sort of like, spiritual God connection with millennials, as in how can I, as this Gen Xer, help, and encourage the next generation? What are the things that we as sort of older people can do to help the next generation?
I think that this reminds me of I was part of a conference this summer where we had these questions around faith and tradition, and there was these questions that each table would talk about, and they were put together. The questions were formed by people who were very obviously not millennials, because when the question would pop up and we were supposed to discuss them, what every single table did was they would deconstruct the question and look at every word, and and then we would take the words and say, that's not really what they mean. What they really mean is this new phrase that we can. And so every table would have these new words and phrases that they would be asking, and we would kind of deconstruct it to reconstruct a bigger truth behind the question. And I think that in all of that confusion and chaos that happens there, I think that the value of the Gen Xer perspective is the certainty that you bring to the table, and the direction that we can glean from that, because we love to deconstruct and we love to look at things in new ways and have a revolutionary perspective. But that's nothing if we don't have a sense of direction. And so I think that's something that I really value about my mentors who grew up in a different generation. Is
a bit of sort of the certainty.
Yeah.
So in the uncertainty, the certainty.
Yeah. It's very paradoxical.
Yeah, it is.
There's lots in life that is, and that's what I really enjoy about paradoxes. It's beautiful.
As far as the thought of sort of millennial and understanding God and faith and church, what does that look like? Because, and again, me learning the certainty of it for sure, but how can I be sort of open and understanding of what the needs are in that way, and sort of like the Christian life, the spiritual sort of nourishing of your generation?
I think that also relates to paradox. What I've noticed that there's this trend of millennials returning to orthodoxy and tradition, and not doing it because it is certain, but exactly the opposite, because there is this mysticism and this mystery surrounding these paradoxes that we have incorporated into our certain structured religion, So God being three in one, like that's very uncertain. It's this and that. It's the both and, and or the like having communion is it's very much bread and wine, but it's also the body and blood of Christ. And I think that these are the things that when we address when we bask in paradox, it's an opportunity to continue learning. There's not the end of the road. There's not that certain period at the end of the sentence. It's more of a ... and then we can continue the sentence and build and live and grow in this wonderful spiritual experience of life.
It sounds amazing. I think like in this part of my brain, it's like yes, and then there's the other part of the brain that's like, wait a second, I want order and that certainty. But I think in conversations like this, it's good to have, because from generations to generations, it's good to learn and yet be open to different change, not be afraid, but to also figure out how to flex and and live together and support one another. Because, I mean, your generation is amazing. I mean, the challenge of this uncertainty, but the challenge of flexibility and desire, but the passion to see the world be better and inclusiveness and equality is amazing.
Yeah,
it really is.
I think living in that tension between loving it and hating it is the gold there. I think that that's what continues the conversation, and I think that the millennials have a lot to figure out because of our deconstructing process, with which we see the world. Looking at the ways that we have really screwed up in the West, especially, and then the ways that the things that we still value and still hold on to, which returns to this idea of tradition. I think that what we're longing for is to be taught a tradition that can help us live in that tension.
Yeah. Currently, Nate, you're on this hitchhiking journey across Canada again.
Yeah.
This time, though, with a purpose.
Yes.
Talk to me about that, because the other trips, there's one you were just trying to 15 days across Canada to get to where you needed to go. Yeah. Then from Victoria, BC to San Diego, 2 months, and looking through your social media, beautiful moments on the beach and some great videos of your thoughts of God. And I know that some of that now is in your social media pages, like Pilgrim's process.
Yeah.
And we'll have all that up, online after. But currently, though, you're doing something very specific with a goal in mind. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So this trip is traveling from Lawrencetown Beach, just beside Halifax, on the eastern shore in Nova Scotia, all the way to Tofino on the west coast. And along the way, because I am processing the experience of university, I'm staying with alumni and professors that I've had in the past from St. Stephen's University to kind of look at what they've done with their degrees and as I wrestle through the hallmarks of my education, things like community and spirituality and travel and how they manifest in the idea of pilgrimage. And so the goal right now is to promote St. Stephen's University and share with people that it's a wonderful outside the box school that also has this really tight knit community of artists and philosophers and academics and farmers. And I wanted to both continue to experience the community that I love there, while being on the road and continuing my education. Yeah.
And so then you're recruiting, or you sort of sharing the story of the university, and then recruiting and saying, hey, this would be a great place if you're interested to come out and do 4 years of school.
Yeah. We have we accept 30 students a year.
30.
So it's kind of,
that's small.
We are very proudly Canada's smallest university. Yeah. And so I don't think that the smallness should stop anybody from applying, because we're more about community than we are about the structure of education that you see in bigger universities. And so I think that while I talk about St. Stephen's University as giving me the chance to reflect on the education that I received there and reflect on the beauty of being in a small town in rural New Brunswick. And then also traveling with the school to Southeast Asia and to Europe, and going back to New Brunswick to reflect on those experiences as well.
It sounds like your school experience there really fits almost your life ethos, for who you are. It really does. How can people find information about this school?
Yeah, the website is ssu.ca.
Okay.
And then if you link up with me on my blog at pilgrimsprocess.org.wordpress.com, or there's a page on Facebook. Yeah. I'm sure we'll have the links for all of that. But if you contact me, I can hook you up with people, or ssu.ca.
Nate, as we sort of finish up the show, as a millennial, as somebody who has this, wonder for the world and connection to people, for some people they'd say, is Christianity and faith in Jesus that? For you, it would, some people would say, that sounds funny for a guy like Nate to be about Jesus and his faith. Because, you're sort of this kind of guy that people say that seems sort of so outside of the Christian faith. Why would you say that you follow Jesus, that this is the place in which, you're journeying through in this?
It's a good question. For me, Christ is an example on how to effectively challenge culture and also live in beauty and compassion and justice with my neighbors. And it's both of those things. And I want to be an activist, but I also want to be a loving part of a community. And I find that Jesus is a perfect model and Lord for people that, like, especially traveling. I can think about Christ's travels or the apostles or the desert fathers or whoever. Is all these role models that did experience justice and compassion and beauty in the world with a sense of purpose, but not in the certainty, but in the uncertainty and in the paradoxes.
That's beautiful. I think that that's something that all of us can learn from, Nate, that I think, we talk about, I follow Jesus, but do we really look at people the way that Jesus did? Are we inclusive to all kinds of people to hear their story? And I think what a wonderful opportunity you've had as you've hitchhiked to actually sit 8 hours or 2 hours or an hour with people that are different.
Yeah.
That the only connection is they picked you up.
Yeah.
Right?
And the interesting thing about all my drivers that I probably should have mentioned is that often they're immigrants or they're marginalized people, and they're people that have experienced being marginalized by society, and it's in their struggle that they feel something for the guy on the side of the road, and when they pick me up, it's this great opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Isn't that?
It's liberating.
It is liberating. So the
sure.
people that could pick you up in the comforts of their big SUV that have all of it probably drive right on by.
Oh, I've never gotten a ride from anything better than a Honda Civic.
Nate Petersen, amazing. And for all the information to follow your travels, it's the Pilgrim's process. If you're listening in the U.S., thank you for this. This was really inspiring and a real encouragement to me, and I know to my listeners, on how to see the world, a real true faith in Jesus. And we'll be praying for you as you travel. And continue to share the stories with us because some of us can't do it, but we'll kind of live vicariously through you.
Great. Yeah, it's been wonderful being on the show.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, that was easy. Wow, what an awesome episode. You know what else would be really awesome? Subscribing to my show. So click that subscribe button on YouTube or search for Your Story of Melinda on your favorite podcasting service to download the show weekly to your mobile device.